Hey, Flimsy Lunch Tray here, back with part 4 of our How to Map series on Big Race. So far we've talked about the map in general. I went to training room and we explored the map in person together. In part 2, we talked about aircraft carriers. In part 3, we talked about battleships. And today in part 4, we'll be talking about cruisers and how they interact on the map Big Race. And also how they interact with other classes here in the map. So, and going first, we like to talk about positioning of cruisers on this map. Now, a big thing I'm going to continue highlighting, but especially for cruisers on the map Big Race, is, as you know, we've been talking about these islands and how most of them all have this these center high points along, the stretch of the island. However, the high points don't go across the entirety of the island, right? So what you have is, around these green circles, is basically the island tapers off. Where when I say tapers off, I mean it goes from a high point down to the low point where you get to the beach. And so what that means is, especially as a cruiser player, you can take advantage of coming alongside behind one of these islands, towards the edges of wherever the enemy target is in line to you, and you can stay concealed, firing at the enemy ship without risking yourself being spotted. So keep that in mind as we go throughout this video. That's something I'm really going to emphasize strongly, especially with cruisers. As we'll be discussing tier 2 through tier 5 cruisers. That's what you're going to find in randoms. However, when it comes to ranked, you'll find, well, the current ranked season, as I record this video, of update 0.10.5, you do see tier 6 and tier 7. So, without further delay, let's talk about cruiser positioning. So, this example is actually, I think it's a bit of a ranked example setup, but this is in domination mode. One of the typical cap layouts you're going to see on this map is something like standard battle. I'm going to attempt to draw a circle. I have no idea how accurate this is, how accurate it's not. But you take out these 3 circles in the center, and you have, in a standard battle, there's only, green team has a cap, red team has a cap, and then you have nothing else going on here. So these are the 2, well, the standard one is what you might see more of in random battles, and sometimes you get epicenter, which is like 3 rings, where you have to cap each of the rings. So I'll kind of be playing off those things as we discuss here in the video. So, for cruisers. So I'm going to kind of draw off, as an example, if there's 4 cruisers, so like let's say there's 2 cruisers represented here, 2 cruisers represented here, and the same for the red team. So as we've discussed, when I approach talking about cruiser positioning, we do need to keep in mind, as I've discussed throughout the series so far, the kill boxes here on this map. And this is especially true for cruisers. So we'll call this kill box number 1, and we'll call this kill box number 2, just for the heck of it, so it keeps our mind straight. So both of these kill boxes are very deadly the first half of the game, and that is very especially true for cruisers. The only thing that it might differ, like for example in kill box 1, is if you're a cruiser and you're coming down this way, but the whole enemy team decides to push north. That doesn't always happen, but every now and then you might see it. Then this isn't so deadly of a kill box because there's no enemy ships down here. Typically on this map, what you get is that you get this general movement where you have a movement like this. I'll draw arrows to you. This is typically what teams are going to do on this map. War destroyers will typically follow these lines, and then you also maybe get it, if there's even more than just 2 destroyers, you might get one who decides to kind of venture out more into this center area. That's more destroyer per se. So this is the general movement that you have, when you're like, oh, you're saying all fronts. Well, I mean, primarily it's just, we erased our go box. Primarily it's just these 2. the flanks really is what mostly gets played on. And this is definitely true the first half of a battle, where you have this movement happening. And even when ships push this direction, you can see that they're clearly avoiding kill box number 2, right? You're out in the open, there's no island cover, it's easy for torpedoes from destroyers, even cruisers come through here. You turn the wrong way, you can get a broadside salvo from this way, or this way, or this way, or this way. So it's just really bad to go in this kill box, especially the first half of the battle. And the same for it down here. You just always have to be mindful of what's happening on the mini-map. How is the red enemy team positioning? How's your team positioning? And play to those strengths or weaknesses if you need to support a flank a bit more than the other. So because of these 2 kill boxes, you as a cruiser player should definitely be avoiding them, at least for the first half of the battle. But again, I'm saying that in general. There's going to be the exception of how's the enemy team positioning. If they're leaving the flank here open on kill box number 1, then ideally you want to move into it. So, cruiser positioning. Now we got those things out of the way. Typically, if I spawn in this flank and I see other players do it too, I kind of, like we talked about with battleships, I kind of hover outside this area. Maybe I can do more like, you know, sometimes it might be more like this, kind of nosing up, seeing what's happening. Because this is also, it is kill box number 1, but it's also like torpedo death alley. It's a no-go zone, especially in the first half when you have destroyers rushing through. Granted, most destroyers at tiers 2 through tier 5 do not have long-range torpedoes in general. So, you know, I play off this island, and then sometimes, you know, there's a torpedo, a couple salvos that might, you know, come up here and then they stop or something like that. But I'm sitting here in this position. If I have one of my destroyer buddies goes in, I'm in a relative position where I can support him, and I'm also taking advantage, again, of the tapered island. It comes down here, it dips, so then I can get salvos off, you know, through this whole, let's see, let's switch to orange, where it's more like something like that. I have this range I'm working with. I can put effective fire support down, and even if, you know, say example, a ship comes down in this direction, then I've got a firing solution into here, and then there, right? So that's the strength of that position as a cruiser player. Oh, I'm trying to erase without erasing the kill box, would be nice. So that is, I would say it's a position number 1, because ideally as a cruiser player, like, you don't have a lot of range at these tiers as a cruiser. So basically you're having to get up close and personal. Another good cruiser position might be, you can go something like, you know, like this. Again, you're playing off the island, you're playing off the tapered ends, depending on what's happening. Because sometimes you have battleships or a cruiser player just rushes right out into open, and that's not such a smart move. Then you're going to have something going on like this, perhaps. And then it can vary. Sometimes you have a movement like this as well. Looking at the red team, let's see, you'll have, because also this, I'm just giving an example from, actually I need to add one more line down here, because sometimes you even have, if in a random battle, you're more spread out, it's not just this location, like, just know I'm just going based off what here is, you know, these lines aren't going to be, oh, if you respawn down here, you don't have to go up here and follow the line. I think that'd be more common sense, but maybe not always. Something like this, where you have this other, if you're spawned down here as example and you move up and you kind of utilize this, but granted you're a bit more in the open in that position. But that is something that you will see. See that there. there. Sometimes something like this. We have something like this. And then sometimes something like this. Parking outside the kill box of number 2. This is traditionally what I'll see, and I'll kind of explain more why these positions. Typically, I would do like position number 1, position number 2, position number 3. But because we're at such a low tier, it doesn't apply this as same as the other maps I've talked about where you're seeing more tier 8 through tier 10 ships. Because this map is it's not the smallest, but it's one of the smaller maps in the game. And usually within a minute, you're already, as a battleship player, you're detecting enemy battleship, or the enemy team's detecting your friendly battleship. Just because this map kind of it focuses you to get up close in playing, but more along, like, generally speaking, like this area, like along the back stretch here, like, well, yeah, something like this. And then for the enemy team, it's, you know, something like this, where you're playing off, you're seeing what happens, that each team's filling each other out, and then once weakness is exposed, then that's usually when the push comes. And so, you know, we'll call the push position number 2 when we get onto that. But let me explain a little bit more of these cruiser positions. Now, note when I'm drawing these lines constantly alongside islands, I'm doing that for a reason. Again, highlighting the fact that these islands are tall in the center, but they're tapered off on the ends down towards they taper down to the waters, which means as a cruiser player, often you can lob shells over the sides of these islands. So you're not exposing yourself as much. I mean, of course, you also have cruisers that can smoke up, so maybe it doesn't apply to you as much. But maybe if you want to disengage, you pop smoke and then you kind of move out, and then when your smoke dissipates, you have an island cover to retreat behind. But what's great about these, for this example, in domination mode, we have these 3 caps going across. These are really good defensive positions because usually this is as far as a cruiser player should go in the beginning, the first half of the battle, as an example. Because your destroyer players ideally should be moving more up into kind of contesting these areas, like LC destroyers, you know, they dive behind this island because it's a big island, and they also can provide spotting over here. If their concealment sucks, then this is a really bad situation for them, and they have to disengage, and sometimes they disengage and they wander out into the kill box, they get detected by another enemy ship, so on and so forth. But when you have cruisers moving up towards these defensive positions, they tend to be able to provide good support for the destroyer players, for your teammates. So that's why when I talk about how to map here on Big Race, when we're looking at cruisers, these islands are really strong to utilize, because you are denying battleships. You know, if the battleship wanders out into these areas, well, I'm going to start, you know, HE spamming you. If a destroyer pushes up to take on contested cap, you have a friendly destroyer in the cap, well, you can just step out and, like, hey, I'm going to support my friendly destroyer, and you know, if not kill the enemy destroyer or force them to retreat, fall back out of the cap, so your team can capture, you know, any of these caps. So that's the strength, what you have going on here. Let's see, there's something else I want to say based off of that. I mean, when we're looking at this map in general, there's not there's not a lot necessarily going on because of how the map copies itself well from, you know, if I drew a line through the map, let's say an orange line. If I draw a line through the map like this, well, that actually was bad. Let's say something like, well, I'll try to pay attention. Yes, use the corners of those boxes. When we do this, if you draw a line through it, see how much the map mirrors each other from this way to this way? So then you're going to see similar movements that team members will be making, enemy team, your team, just even unconsciously, just because of how the map is set up. It's just how you play the map, right? when you go to these positions. So you can see there's a lot of mirroring already going on with how I draw these cruiser positions. So the map mirrors itself, very well from northwest to southeast perspective, but the map does not mirror itself well when we go from a southwest to northeast perspective. Oh, I didn't follow the lines again. Use the grid, Flimsy, use the grid. So the map doesn't mirror itself as well from this perspective. And that can, if you use this to your advantage, you can really throw off the enemy team. Because sometimes I've seen the battle, it's no longer like the previous line I just drew. It's no longer from, oh, this is the front line, our enemy team, red team's here, green team's here. I've seen on this map where it flips to this way, where now the green team's down here, red team's up here. And then it shifts. Now you don't, as for the green team, this kill box is no longer a big issue because you have map control, you control the area. But then for the red team, there's the kill box on their side. And so one of the biggest mistakes I see when a map flips like this, and so the green team's down here, red team's up here, is that I'll see ships from either side just rushing out, leaving these islands. So let's switch to white. Or we could just make a very odd circle. Is that the, green team pushes out beyond, past these islands here. This island chain is what I want to emphasize. And then they wander out into the kill box. Or the red team does it as well, or they leave this island chain because they feel more cornered, boxed in. They wander out to the kill box, and then the green team's able to take them out. So when a map flips to like this, when you're a cruiser player, you want to utilize these islands. You have 4 islands right here. Then you also have these 2 other additional ones further back if you need to utilize those as well. Because if you wander out across this line into this kill zone, you're just going to die quickly. I just see it happen too often when the battle flips like this, when each team wins one flank completely, and then now this is the battle line, where it's green team, as an example, is fighting this side, red team example, fighting over on this side. And that's how I've seen battles completely flip. Like green team was doing well, they have the points advantage, they have both the caps, right? Because this cap, these 3 islands, it doesn't work the same way for the red team up here. And then green team just overextends, they get in a rush, oh, we're winning, we're gonna win the game, and then red team's able to make a comeback, kill and win the game. So that's just something to be mindful of. Because when the battle does shift like that, you as a cruiser player is like, oh, now I need to flip my mentality. This is no longer the front line. Now it's this way. And then how can I utilize the islands to help secure a win for my team? So that's something I do want to emphasize here on this map. Yeah, I don't think I really need to say anything more about positioning. Just be paying attention to how the enemy team is moving, how your team is moving. Because if you don't hold this defensive line, and let's say red team completely pushes through, now you as a cruiser are open water, and you're not going to fare very well in open water. And you don't typically get the most speed at this tier, so it takes you longer to traverse across the map as well. So just keep that in mind. So let's talk about how cruisers interact with the other classes in this battle, this map. So let's first just discuss how cruisers interact with aircraft carriers, and I'll work our way down to destroyers. So as I discussed, a typical aircraft positioning, let's use pink as an example. You have the aircraft carrier player will stay in spawn, or he'll move down to this area, and then yeah, Because an aircraft carrier player at this tier doesn't have great concealment, except the coming Russian CVs at this lower tier have fantastic concealment, more than any of the other aircraft carriers in the game, because reasons. But so when you go off of this general area, that's usually where you should expect the planes flying from, is what I want to get at. So when you're a cruiser and you're moving up to these positions, and let's say enemy aircraft carrier player moves down to this position, you're the closest target for him to go for. He's not as likely to fly his planes all the way across to the other flank. Sometimes you can get 2 CVs on each team, so then you have a 4 CV match here on Big Race. So if you're sitting trying to park in these positions and a wise enemy aircraft carrier player is paying attention, then he may start sitting in planes to bomb you, dislodge you from those positions, and helping his team push in and take the flank. So that's just something, again, you need to be mindful of, because the aircraft carrier player takes away your concealment possibilities when you try to park behind these islands and fire over them without being detected. You can be sitting there firing undetected, all of a sudden enemy planes show up, battleships back here, he sees he has broadside, he lobs the islands over that tapered side of the island and gets a citadel in on you or something, you lose over half HP, right? So that's how the aircraft carrier player can really affect things in a really bad degree for you as a cruiser player on this map if they're competent. Sometimes they dislodge players, and then you have to be maneuverable, because you don't want to be sitting still eating torpedoes, you don't want to be sitting still eating rockets. So it forces you to be on the move, and then it's hard to engage enemy ships as they push into this area when you're trying to avoid aircraft carrier player. And it's the same if you're pushing from this way, moving up here, and then friendly or enemy, the aircraft carrier player goes to this position. It's the same philosophy here. I tend to see the planes more in this side of the battle. I don't tend to see them as much up here. The only way I tend to see more aircraft carrier player activity up here is if the team with that aircraft carrier has won this flank, and then the aircraft carrier player decides to position himself up here. And then now he has an influence more directly on this side of the battle. I've seen that before. It just depends on the aircraft carrier player, if he feels safe enough to move up, or if he's just going to park and spawn the whole time. Most aircraft carrier players will likely just sit and spawn the whole time back here in this area, and sending planes in. So you don't have as much of that influence, but if they do in these positions, it's more of a threat to you as a cruiser player when you're in these positions, so just be mindful of that. Otherwise, planes can get anywhere across the map, really quick, so just be mindful. And you can also always utilize the mini-map, and see when the planes are first detected, what direction do they keep getting detected from, and then you can figure out where the aircraft carrier roughly is based off of that information. When we talk about cruiser interaction with battleships, there's not a lot per se going on here. Battleships at these tiers, tier 2 through tier 5, they're very slow. They take a very long time to move across the map, and their concealment usually sucks, and so they're generally one of the first spotted classes in the game at this tier. So then you shouldn't necessarily be surprised as a cruiser player, all of a sudden a battleship just is right on top of you. That doesn't happen on this map unless you're just parked behind the island the entire time and a battleship player just sails in and kills you. So you want to utilize, your HE, setting them on fire. If you have torpedoes as well, that doesn't mean pulling out broadside in front of a battleship just to get your torpedoes away. That happens too often. You want to play it smarter than that. So again, really just focus on utilizing the edges of these islands when you can, or if you have a smoke screen, destroyer lays down a smoke screen for you in focusing on the battleships. At this tier, usually the battleships are not, they don't have accurate guns per se. They're kind of wonky. Some are more wonkier than others. Some are kind of, yeah, it's okay. So you kind of have that to your side because they don't have it as tight as dispersion. I mean, once you start hitting tier 6 and up, you begin to notice a change in dispersion on enemy battleships, or just battleships in general. So you kind of have that to your aid if you get caught out in the open. If you're maneuvering and just cruising along, you can sometimes even just avoid a full salvo from an enemy battleship. So yeah, so they don't have as accurate guns at these tiers, is what I'm trying to say. So you can use that as a if you're lucky, but yeah, luck doesn't generally win battles in World of Warships. So, but just know that for your information as a cruiser player. Nothing else I really want to say there. Enemy cruisers, as you've seen, we've drawn these lines to where other cruisers will tend to park. Also, sometimes there'll be cruisers who will push even further in if they want to back up their destroyer player, and they take more of these aggressive positions so that they can help support their team even more, or their teammates. It can be risky for them moving up further past here, but generally when you get far enough, you tend to be all right. Actually, this would be something more like you want to do that. You don't want to sail broadside the whole time going across there. There's a battleship or a cruiser player with armor piercing loaded. That's where you're going to see more. Sometimes you can see more cruiser interaction. You get a more aggressive cruiser player. At these tiers, like I discussed with battleships players, when you're at these tiers 2 through 5, you'll have players who are new to the game, don't really understand the concept, and so they just they go for it, not utilizing the islands well, and so sometimes those cruiser players will die in the first 5 minutes of the battle. And then you also have pros, people who've played the game for a long time. They're really good at the game, Unicum players who will come down to these tiers to just relax, get away from the high tier gimmicks, and then you'll see them making like these really I can't tell if is that a new player or is that like actually a good player and he's going to utilize this island position really well. So just that's something to be mindful of when it comes to the interaction here against enemy cruisers on this map. So generally speaking, what I like about these first positions as a cruiser player when you're dealing with enemy cruisers is that if the enemy cruiser wants to push up, you already have the defensive position established, and you can usually punish him moving in because generally speaking, you have a friendly destroyer who's somewhere out a little further ahead and can provide the spotting, even over here. And you can punish them as they push in while you're sitting nice and tidy, utilizing the island to your advantage. But if enemy cruisers get more in position here, it can be a pain, but now they're in this kill box. The only way for them to get out is exposing themselves or pushing forward. And if, like we talked about in part 3, if you as a battleship are kind of parked around in this area, waiting to punish enemy ships that make a mistake, then that will tend to work to favor for your team. Yes. I had something else I wanted to say there. It's terrible goldfish memory sometimes here on Flimsy. And then I don't think I really want to say anything else about cruisers. Just be mindful and if you can help yourself learn what cruisers have torpedoes and which ones don't have torpedoes, you'll be doing yourself a huge favor. Because if there's a cruiser rushing you and you're like, why is he rushing me? And then all of a sudden he turns and dumps torpedoes into you and you die, you know why. And then if you are in a torpedo capable cruiser and enemy cruiser is rushing you and you know he doesn't have torpedoes, you can just totally wreck him. That's more of a noob player, if I will say, who's doing that to you. So the vice versa works there as well. Let's see, let's erase those lines and then let's talk about how cruisers interact with destroyers on this map. Of course, destroyers have the best concealment in the game, and with these for in this example with the domination mode on these caps, their destroyer players are going to be playing for the cap. That's kind of the expectation they have. Play the objective, provide scouting, contest capture points. And so again, as a cruiser player, when you park more in these defensive positions around the cap, you're able to support your friendly destroyer who moves in, but also have the opportunity to take out enemy destroyer. And you also have to watch out for those torpedo alleys on this map. So let's say something like this. I don't know if this is the best color to use, but that's what we're going to use. People never expected a destroyer on the flank, right? Yeah, and this whole area can be a torpedo alley and kill box number 2 sometimes. Oh, I also need to add this on too. So these orange, all the drawn rectangles represent torpedo alleys from enemy destroyers. So that's just something you need to be mindful of as a cruiser player. If there's a destroyer running around in this area, then you can expect there's probably torpedoes in the water. Destroyers at these lower tiers, they tend to have somewhat more of a quicker reload time on their torpedoes tubes versus higher tiered ships. So I mean, tier 2 Smith, I think it can dump a one torpedo out every 10 seconds. I don't remember the full setup. And then you have, I think, something like the Yumikaze. It can dump torpedoes out in a relatively short amount of time. That's a Japanese destroyer. So you can be seeing a lot of torpedo action on this map. So one, you need to be aware of these torpedo alleys that you'll tend to see torpedoes coming from. I guess I probably could draw one here too. So just, again, be mindful of where the enemy destroyer is positioning and relative towards you, because you may think you're safe as you move up here, but enemy destroyer moves out here in the open, and then he throws torpedoes, and then all of a sudden, now you're not safe. And remember, smoke screens are torpedo magnets, so be mindful of that. So again, utilize these defensive positions. So when when an enemy destroyer is spotted, you as a cruiser player can focus fire and take him out, because that provides a huge advantage to your team. You get to take out an enemy destroyer who's gets to move around in the dark most of the time, since they have best concealment in the game. I guess that will be before submarines make their full entrance into the game at this point in time, but you know what I mean. So just be mindful of, they're going to be coming more. They get more close and personal on this map, and they have these torpedo alleys. So then how can you utilize that to your advantage? And again, you have, let's get rid of these orange circles now, because I think you get what I'm saying with these torpedo alleys. You have these kill boxes, and I see many a times enemy destroyer players make mistakes when they enter these kill boxes, especially down here in the beginning of the battle, and you can totally punish that. As a cruiser player, or whatever class you may be sitting out in this area, or even if you're a destroyer moving into this area. So just have the expectation that you're going to come across enemy destroyers moving into this cap, and then how are you positioned to effectively deal with them. So I think that's really all I want to say. I feel like as I've done each of the videos, things are becoming perhaps more clear for you on the map Big Race, of what does that mean for you and what class you find yourself in. So next week in part 5, we'll talk about destroyers, and then part 6 I'll be showing you battle footage, like roughly 20 to 30-second clips where I'm like, hey, these things I've been showing and explaining in these previous parts. This is them in action. This is a cruiser positioning behind the island here. This is example of aircraft carrier player who's back here and he's throwing planes in here. This is an example of a destroyer moving into the kill box and dying at the very start of the battle, or cruiser player. So just showing and trying to emphasize those things to you, and how you can best utilize positioning on this map, but also how you get to use the map to your advantage in terms of islands, capture points, so on and so forth. So if you appreciated this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more. And if you haven't subscribed, thanks. I really appreciate it as we continue to grow the community here with you. So until next time, take care.